welcome to the webinar. I think we'll give people just a couple more seconds to come into the room. I recognize some of the names that are here already. I suspect there will be a few more, so let's just give it a second. I did a previous webinar to this one just a few days ago on the same topic, went very well, and learned some things from that one that I wanted to improve in this one to have a slightly better replay option for the webinar. And here we are. And I appreciate your joining in. So let me start with just a few slides to lead in to where I'm coming from on this. And some of you may well know that. And let me just expand this. Okay. It does provide a bit of a context as to why we've been building the climate web, why we've been focusing on knowledge management for many years, and why I think it's so important. For starters, you're probably familiar with this graph or something very much like it. It shows both growing greenhouse gas emissions on the left and rising global temperatures on the right. And what you notice is a pretty inexorable change. We haven't, even though we've been talking about this issue for literally decades, we haven't seen a lot of change in the trend in greenhouse gas emissions. And now we're seeing a pretty steady upward trend for average global temperature at the very least. So for those of us that have been in this space for a long time, this is a frustrating graph because it makes you question, okay, we've been at this for decades. What are we accomplishing? And one of the quotes that I really like is this one from Albert Einstein, that you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that was used to create the problem. And we're certainly giving that our best shot with climate change. But the question I had was, what could we potentially be doing differently? And another reason for doing something differently is this great quote from Margaret Heffernan, her 2011 book, Willful Blindness, which is not about climate change, but this particular quote is perhaps the best quote ever about climate change. And that is, in failing to address climate change, all the forces of willful blindness come together like synchronized swimmers in a spectacular water ballet. And you really can't come up with a better mental image for why we are where we are today on climate change. And a couple of quotes that have really informed my thinking about the knowledge management space are these two. One from Woodrow Wilson: "There is no idea in our heads that has not been worn shiny by someone else's brains," which certainly goes for climate change today. And then Carla Odell is one of the mothers of knowledge management. Carla Odell has a great quote: "If only we knew what we know." And from my standpoint, what if anybody could know what we know about climate change? What if we all had access to our collective knowledge about what's working and what's not working and what the options are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? What could we be doing differently? Could we be doing a better job of tackling climate change? And that's why about 10 years ago, we started building the climate web. And it really is a digital climate brain. It really is a second brain. It's not limited, by the way, to the climate web. I mean, we use TheBrain software. It's a commercial software. We use it for our personal knowledge management. I have my own personal and professional brains in this software. And it's not an exaggeration to say that if something happened to those brains, retirement or harakiri would probably be my two options, because my professional brain has everything I've ever written, all my client products, all my papers, all my PowerPoints. And it's just incredibly useful to have all of that information in a digital brain, because I'll start writing something and I'll realize, well, wait a second, I wrote this 6 months ago. I don't need to write it again. And so there's a lot of value to this software platform. We happen to be using it in this case to try and get our heads around a wicked problem. And so that is where the climate web comes in. and now premium access to the climate web. And the basic idea of the climate web is to basically cover all of the different topics relevant to climate change. So it covers hundreds of topics, and you can see a few of them here, but communications and ethics and impacts and carbon pricing and the social cost of carbon. And it puts it all into a knowledge web, which is unsurpassed. And no one else, I don't think, has ever tried to do this with this software or generally speaking. So at this point, we have about 25,000 hours of knowledge curation into the premium access climate web. What's happened, and the reason for this webinar, is that literally a few weeks ago, the software platform that we use, TheBrain software, came out with a massive upgrade to the online version of the software, which is what I'm going to be using for the webinar today, because previously the online version of the software was really weak and really slow. And so it was really a challenge to get people to use the climate web because it was such an off-putting experience online, and getting people to download the climate web to their own computers presented big challenges in its own right. So now that we have this software upgrade for the Brain software, we've created a totally open access climate web with about 1,500 thoughts. And I'll show you a little bit of that, probably sufficient for anyone with just a general interest in climate change. But then we have the premium access climate web with 150,000 plus thoughts, which is really a collective intelligence around climate change. And I'll be demonstrating that to you as well. And it's because of this change in the software and the fact that we've been able to adapt the climate web to this new version of the software that it's a game changer for making climate knowledge and actionable climate accessible through the climate web and the Brain software. So that gives you a very quick intro to why we are where we are on this topic and why we've been focusing on this for so long. And it's a bit of a Don Quixote exercise, and trying to get your head around something like climate change from a knowledge management perspective is not easy. And it took us a long time before we got to the point that the climate web really had a lot of standalone value for purposes of pretty much anyone wanting to dig into this software. What I'm going to do is jump into the basic climate web first, and it'll just show you a little bit about the new software version, because anybody can get into this at theclimateweb.org and explore it. And there is a lot of content there. So let me go. And as you do have questions as we go, please go ahead and just put them into the chat, and I'll keep one eye on the chat as we go. So let me share a screen here and bring up the basic climate web and share that. So this is the basic climate web. You can come into this, as I said, anyone at theclimateweb.org. And it's very fast, and you can simply click on any of these thoughts. So there's one thought here in terms of all you need to know. And it just, in just a couple of minutes, you can see everything you need to know to be able to navigate the climate web successfully. You can go into the $1 trillion questions, which are the really big questions that I think are out there today about what's going on and what will determine the future. Can we overcome our evolution? Gets into the topic of the fact that our risk brains are still searching for lions in the Serengeti. Our risk brains have not had time to catch up with the kinds of risks that we're facing. And so our brains still primarily respond to see lion run. And that is not serving us well for purposes of climate change. But you can see here, and will there be an inevitable policy response? What about climate repair and engineering? How fast will the low carbon transition be? You can dig into those questions, at least up to a certain point, through these thoughts just by clicking on them. Uh, we have various other things that you can explore. We also have a really fun set of climate web ebooks that we've built. And these are specifically built for a new feature that I'll show you of how you can visualize or how you can use the climate web. So for example, let me just show you what's across the top here. So there are pins. And so these at any time you can come back in and take a look and jump to these different spots in the climate web. For purposes of the basic climate web, I would not suggest going into the types or tags. They're not very helpful for you. You can come into the search field and type in searches to find materials in the thoughts example. But what's one of the really interesting things here is that over here, you see this little eye icon at the top. And if you click on that eye icon, suddenly the Plex is gone. And the reason for that is that a lot of people historically have found this Plex on the left a bit disconcerting. And a lot of squiggles, there can be a massive amount of information in there. A lot of people don't like the Plex. And so they've now made the software so that you can simply, by clicking on the I button, turn off the Plex. And it basically turns the climate web and the brain into what looks a lot like a conventional website. And so you can just scroll down here, you can click on these thoughts, or you can go all the way down and access the different ebooks. Let me just show you, for example, the climate music ebook. So if you click on that and then come down and go to the introduction, that you can read this page, which introduces you to the book, but then I can click on selected music videos and it will open up. This is a small subset. We've collected a lot of music videos in the climate web, but this basically just will pull open the video right here and you can play it right in the ebook. And then you see that all the other videos are now on the left-hand side. So this new way of being able to display information without a Plex makes the whole thing a lot friendlier for a lot of people. And so it's a pretty powerful feature. And that's why we've added in this whole series of ebooks into the climate web. Quite a bit of content, the psychology of climate change, Earth's precarious history, 6 degrees of climate emergency, which is a book by Linus, which I'll also be showing you more in a second. And what we've done is we've pulled out a lot of information from this book. So you can simply click on what are some of the likely impacts of climate change at 2 degrees. And again, I can just close the eye to make it a bit bigger here. What are some of the likely impacts identified by Linus at 3 degrees? And we're not putting in a lot of citations here, et cetera. This is just to give you sort of an interesting look at what Linus did in this book. The book is chock full of information, and you can read the book, and of course, you would never remember the details that we're covering here. And yes, so for example, if I go up into search, Eric, this is for your question. If I go up into the search, you will see all of the recent thoughts that you've actually clicked on. So it keeps a comprehensive breadcrumb trail of your recent thoughts. And in your browser, you can also use the backspace key of your browser to simply retrace your steps going backwards. So this gives you a look at a couple of the capabilities of the basic climate web. So anybody can come in here and have some fun and spend quite a bit of time. I mean, just for example, the climate change grab bag. So we point you to some of the more interesting blogs that we collected and climate related LinkedIn groups, some of the better books that aren't climate change specifically, but are great books for understanding a lot about climate change. Some of them are psychological books, Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. And so we don't have the entire books in here, but in some cases, in the premium climate access, we'll have extracted materials, et cetera. But again, of this grab bag idea of simply showing you some of the things that that we have identified over over thousands of hours of searching the internet, and make them sort of readily available to you through the climate web. So what I'm going to jump to now, if nobody else has any questions specifically about this, I'm going to, and let me just stop sharing for a second. So what I'm going to do now is jump into the premium access climate web, which is the primary topic of this webinar. And we're only going to really be able to scratch the surface, but I think I'll be able to give you a pretty good perspective on what's in it and what you can do with it. Again, what I showed you in the basic climate web, there are about 1,500 thoughts there. And each of the things that you saw on the screen is a thought. The premium access climate web has more than 150,000 thoughts. Each of them, by the way, individually curated, individually added by us, by the climatographers. One thing that a lot of people ask us is, do you simply send bots out at night to grab stuff off the internet and populate the climate web? And the answer for that is no. Everything in here has been identified, sought out, curated, and added by us. So that just, and linked, the thoughts in the premium access climate web are the 150,000 thoughts are linked in 700,000 ways. And so you start to see why it might look like a brain at the end of the day, because if I could show you how everything is linked together, other than terrifying you, it's a pretty amazing sort of brain kind of diagram. So let me go ahead and share my screen again, this time focusing on the premium access climate web. And let me again expand this so you can get as much out of it as you can. Oh, and I see, by the way, there's the offer here. What we've been trying to figure out what is the right price point for this new ability to get to the climate web in the online. We spent millions of dollars of time building the climate web, 25,000 hours. But our premium access price point right now is $19.99. And the offer there says, okay, 50% discount. And that discount lasts for as long as you're a subscriber to premium access. And there's also an annual version that you'll see if you want to take advantage of that. And it's 50% off of that as well. But let me go ahead and jump into the premium access climate web in some additional detail. Now, I've used that eye feature that I already had pointed you to, because I wanted to give you as much real estate to see the Plex as possible. So when you come into, and I should point out that anyone can come into the premium access at premium.theclimateweb.org. And there's a lot you can see, even if you haven't purchased premium access. So you can explore it, you can get to know its capabilities. There's a lot you can do in the premium access. But so let me just click on this thought, no premium access. The way it works is if you don't have premium access, then a lot of the links that you might click on won't actually deliver you to where you're hoping to go. So there's a lot you can do, but it doesn't work in the way that it ought to. And that's the point of having premium access. So let me just jump back here. So here you can come in, and the first page actually has a lot of the same content as the basic climate web, but you can come in and there's a quick start thought that helps you see what is it that you need to know. We have a lot more help and guidance information, including an entire video user's guide here for the premium access climate web, because it is so much more massive a knowledge base. You can't just click your way through it as easily and as effectively as you can the basic climate web. So there are help thoughts, there are frequently asked questions, uh, to what have we added recently, how the climate web is structured to deliver actionable knowledge, and so it walks through. And I'm not going to stop and look at a lot of this stuff, but you can quickly explore this. We use a lot of graphics, a lot of PowerPoint slides to help keep things a little bit interesting, a little bit fun. Um, we have it set up so you can take a general tour depending on who you are. So, for example, if you're a concerned climate activist, if you're a college level faculty or student, if you're a journalist, if you're a K through 12 teacher, if you're a policymaker, a philanthropist, we've structured this stuff so that you can come in through a door that is specific to what you might be looking for. And then we point to a lot of materials of particular interest to that audience. And again, I'll note that a lot, if you come in without premium access, a lot of these links won't actually work. With premium access, all of these links will deliver you to the content that is at the other end of the link. And the journalism one is an interesting case in point, just because journalists might be coming at the topic of climate change from so many different directions that we've listed quite a few of the insights pages. We've listed quite a few of the news and opinion collections, quite a few dashboards. So it's a long list for purposes of journalists trying to see what am I most interested in taking a look at. You can come in and do the same thing for a business tour. So if you come in through the business tour lens, it will point you, it'll tell you a little bit about our work with business. We wrote the first textbook on business climate risk back in 2011. My career has been in business risk management and climate risk management, working with companies around the world. So there is a massive amount of information relevant to business decision making and business decision support in the climate web. And this is one of the great quotes that characterizes what we've built here. And this is from a Fortune 100 user that we were helping do scenario planning with the climate web. And his final comment was, it's like having 100 leading experts in climate science, risk management, and corporate strategy collaborating with you at the decision-making table. And that's the power of knowledge management in the context of not only business decision-making, but anyone's decision-making around climate change. Jeffrey, I see your question, any quick search function. I mean, there is a quick search function in the sense that you can come up here and search. I will tell you that you can search for a massive amount of stuff, but when you get to something as granular as CO2 emissions, modern container ship, you're probably better off going to Google. So if you're looking for, what is the maritime sector doing in decarbonization and all kinds, and what are the climate risks for the maritime sector, you'll find all of that in the climate web. But when you get down to the level of the kind of factoid that you put in this particular case, the climate web is not Google. And so there are certain use cases where, frankly, you're better off just searching for it in the internet, especially now with ChatGPT. But what we've collected in the climate web is a web that allows you to understand many other things in ways that you could never get at through Google searches and ChatGPT, if that helps sort of clarify it. So let me come back up here. So what we have here, pins, and these are available to you at any given time. One way to think about it, and I'll show you this in a second, one way to think about the climate web is 150,000 climate Lego blocks that can be organized and reorganized in whatever ways make sense. And I think you'll see that as we go. But you can come in to the pins at any time and click on those. But what I've done is put together, and I do want to click on one pin here. what I've done is put together a tour of some of what you can do in the climate web. And when I show you things, so for example, what we do is start by organizing lots of materials and reports. And so if I click on this, just to give you an example, you can see that it's linked to back to topical headings. Now, if I go down here, you'll see the report is actually here. It's in the cloud. We don't keep all of the documents in the climate web because it would just be too big. But if you click on that link, it'll open up that report from the cloud. You can read it, you can download it. So, and you can do that for basically 25,000 PDF documents that we have organized in the climate web. So we start by organizing a massive amount of content and reports. We organize that content into reports into topical headings. So in this case, for example, business climate risk sources, and then all of these are sub topics: physical impact risks, investor action as climate risk, policy outcomes as business risk. There are about 800 of these source headings. But we also do basically the same thing for news and opinion collections. There are about 500 topical headings for news and opinion collections. And what you can do, all of these are URLs. So if I click on an individual URL, you'll see the link here. You can open it up. It'll open up in a tab in your browser, and you can read that. Story. What this does is basically allow you to survey across hundreds of topics. How has the news and opinion around this topic been evolving over the last decade, say? Because we have 35,000, 40,000 news and opinion stories organized in the premium access climate web. Just continuing the tour, and these aren't topically linked. I'm just trying to show you some of the different things that you can find easily. So here is a collection of videos, this one specific to climate change litigation and liability in the business arena. But again, this is one of many dozens of video collections, whether carbon offsets, whether risk, whether the extremes of climate change, all kinds of stuff. Is available. And Jeffrey, what might be an example of a question topic? Well, let me just walk you through the rest of the tour, because I think you'll see exactly that. So let me just keep wandering through for a second. Here is 2020 Linus, an example of an individual book that we've gone through. And we've literally organized, as you can see from this screenshot, we've literally pulled out hundreds of factoids. And this is the power of the climate web. We've pulled out these hundreds of factoids, and then we're able to organize those factoids and dates and numbers and impacts of climate change in all kinds of ways. And you'll see some of the dashboards that we do that with in just a second. So the power here is that we've gone through hundreds of reports. We've pulled out the key ideas, the key graphics, and then we've organized them in their own right so that you can access literally the knowledge from dozens or hundreds of reports without actually having to read all that stuff yourself, much less remember it. So that's exactly what I'm going to show you with this next thought, which is E stands for extracted materials. And so we've gone through these reports like Linus, and then we've extracted materials, impacts by type, impacts by geography. And this is specifically impacts of climate change. There's lots of other extracted materials headings here, but forecasted climate impacts, climate change, tipping points. So if I just click just on one of these, you can see some of the content and if we go down, you can see actually all of the content, all of the ideas, the graphics that we've extracted for a particular point in terms of extracted materials. all of these materials link back to their original sources. So if you find a graphic you're interested in, you can go right back to its original source and see where it came from and what else might be in that source. So let me just retrace my steps here for a second, get back to where I was. So continuing the tour here, one of the things that we then do is say, okay, if you're interested in a particular topic, like climate solutions, for example, what are all of the index entries, which is I, what are all of the source collections, what are all of the news and opinion, what are all of the website organizations, and what are all of the extracted materials that you can access. And I could click on any of these links, and anyone with premium access can click on any of these links to jump to that spot in the climate web. So you can start to see how you can use this for lots of different research or storytelling purposes. And there is no one answer to the question of what is the power of of premium access. From here, I'm going to take you to a deep dive index entry. Carbon pricing, everybody is somewhat familiar with carbon pricing. We use the index entries as topical front doors into the topic being discussed. So for carbon pricing, you can come down here. It points you to some of the key where you can start digging into the literature and news and opinion and websites and videos and extracted materials. But then we also sort of lay out the topic of carbon pricing and what are some of the key questions? What are the uncertainties? We point to many other places in the climate web where you can dig into a related topic around carbon pricing. We have a short review of the relevant carbon pricing literature. And again, simply by clicking on any of these links, you can jump to that report or to that literature. For purposes of this tour, I'm going to click on one of these thoughts, the social cost of carbon. And that jumps us to the social cost of carbon deep dive index entry. And you can see why I wanted to maximize the Plex space here and why I put the notes field down below. But so here, the social cost of carbon, which some people have often referred to as the most important number that you've never heard of, walks you through what it is. There's a very recent new report that if I clicked on, you could go to that report and you could see all the ideas and graphics that we've pulled out of the report. But we've also just included one particular key graphic, sort of the key graphic from the entire report is right here. And then you can basically come up to speed on the topic of the social cost of carbon just by reading this one page that we've authored based on our having worked on this topic for many, many years. So for this and hundreds of other topics, it's a way to almost instantly come up to speed in a way that really isn't possible anywhere, I would argue, anywhere else. And if I click on this, for example, as for one of our climate insights pages, it's another way of saying, okay, here is our one-page summary of the topic with some interesting graphics, some interesting quotes. But again, what are some of the key issues? The topic of a risk-averse social cost of carbon. Should we be using integrated assessment models? What are some of the numbers that have been in play for the social cost of carbon? It's all right here. And then you can jump right back to the deep dive if you want to. But what I'm going to instead do is I just mentioned the integrated assessment models because those are what's used to build the social cost of carbon. And you can jump to the integrated assessment models deep dive and then dig into that topic. Integrated assessment models are a huge part of how we do climate economic modeling, et cetera. They happen to be a pretty bad way of doing climate economic modeling, but it's the only way we have, since there's no other way to go from general circulation models to the economics of climate change. You have to use some sort of simplifying tool, and that is integrated assessment models. But by taking a look at this one page, you can see that integrated assessment models have a lot of issues and some real challenges. And so just for example, if you click on this link, the economics of immense risk, urgent action, and radical change, that will jump you to this recent report by Stern, the author of the Stern Review. And we've pulled out a lot of the key ideas from this report. And to say he's critical of integrated assessment models would be an understatement. And so in just a few minutes, you can come up to speed here on the whole debate around integrated assessment modeling as a way of thinking about climate economics and climate policy and climate futures. So I've shown you several of the index entries. There are, maybe 100 deep dive index entries. There are more than 3,000 index entries in the climate web overall. So the index is a massive tool that is available. You can literally click your way through the entire topic of climate change just by clicking on index entries, parent index entries that are broader, index and sub-index entries that are narrower. You get the idea. So now sort of the final thing that I'm going to show you is how we take all of this stuff, sort of all the different kinds of things that we pull together in the climate web, in the premium access climate web, and then we can organize it for very specific purposes, for very specific questions. So this is what's called a dashboard. And a dashboard uses a tag, and you can tell it's a tag just by the shape of the thought. And the beauty of that, and I won't get into details, but the beauty of that is that the links here are virtual, they're not physical, and that has some advantages that we don't need to go into. But if you do get into the premium access climate web, you'll learn to navigate the tag collections very effectively. And in fact, Eric, we will, depending on exactly what you mean by that question, I will show you something that I think answers it in about 2 seconds. So here, for example, we've pulled these dates from all sorts of different places, and you can click on the date to go back to the original source. But you can basically sort of see the whole chronology around the oil sector and climate change. In 1957, Exxon scientists published papers showing clear awareness of the link between fossil fuels and rising CO2. 1969, oil industry funds study. 1977, Exxon executives told that burning fossil fuels likely influencing climate. And it goes on and on from there. And you can basically track the entire chronology of oil and climate change just through this one dashboard. This is one of about 600 dashboards in the premium access climate web, including other chronologies: a climate science timeline, business response chronology, climate litigation and liability chronology. You can dig into all of those very easily. Another example of a dashboard is, we've talked a little bit about carbon pricing. What is the carbon pricing that would be associated if we were serious about the 1.5 degree, 2 degree targets? What kind of carbon pricing would be required to actually achieve one of those targets or those targets? And this dashboard pulls together the most important index entries, the most important topical headings, the most important individual reports for that question, and then the best graphics and ideas that we've pulled from all kinds of documents, all kinds of reports, specifically for this question. And again, you can there's lots of different dashboards relating to carbon pricing. There's carbon pricing 101. There's carbon pricing forecasts. There's carbon pricing for 1.5 and 2 degree targets. There's internal carbon pricing. All of these are different dashboards for exploring and digging into a topic in a matter of minutes that otherwise would take you hours to do. And that's what you're getting with premium access to the climate web. You really are leveraging in a very real way the 25,000 hours that we've spent organizing this information in the kind of way that you might have organized it if you had decided to spend, or if you were crazy enough to spend 25,000 hours of your life organizing climate knowledge for purposes of trying to help people find actionable knowledge and trying to help answer that original Carla Odell question, if only we knew what we know. Because we know a frigging lot. We know an amazing amount. And yet you can read a report, you'll forget most of it within 3 weeks. We're constantly reinventing the wheels in this space. We're constantly having the same climate change 101 conversations. And the whole idea of the climate web is to try and help people get beyond that. Um, so how bad could the impacts of sea level rise be? That is a dashboard evaluating a 100% renewable energy future, a big topic of discussion, a very contentious topic of discussion. And if you come in here, you can see what some of the major studies of this question have concluded and where they agree and where they disagree about how quickly and whether we can actually accomplish 100% renewable energy future. A totally different topic, just to give you a sense of the scope, exploring climate refugees, the whole literature around what kind of climate migrants or environmental migrants will we see over time. So I can just come in here and click on N for news and opinion collection. And you can then literally just track uh, 10 years of conversation around climate migrants. And what I would hope or would wish is that a lot of journalists would take advantage of this kind of thing so that maybe we could write better the next stories. We don't have to write the same story that has been written 25 times before in previous years. So this is just another example of one of about 700 dashboards, and we're adding new dashboards all the time, by the way. And for premium access users, if you have a particular question, we'll certainly take into account and try and build a dashboard around that for you if you let us know what that question is, because chances are the information is in the climate web, even if we haven't built a dashboard around it quite yet. So, Eric, I'm not 100% sure this is exactly what you were talking about. We do have a lot of coverage of sort of the doubt and denial literature in Premium Access Climate Web. One of the things that you'll find here is the entire skeptical science database, which is a great way of tracking down a lot of the different arguments around climate doubt and denial. And you can simply click on this individual, this topic, this thought, and that will show you all of the different pages or URLs available through the skeptical science database. And you can simply click on any of these, and then through that URL is right here down below. You simply click on that link, and that will take you to the skeptical science page specific to that topic. We're not doing anything magical here with the skeptical science database. We haven't downloaded it to the climate web, but we've made it very easy to access the information. And by the way, I should point out that the climate web and premium access climate web are now extremely easy to use on mobile devices, 100 times easier than they used to be. But you can do everything I'm showing you here on your iPhone, on your Android phone, or on your iPad, etc. It works amazingly well on mobile devices. So another sort of similar case is Wikipedia and climate change, because we've gone through Wikipedia, as we all know, is an amazing resource. But the problem with Wikipedia is that it's got hundreds and hundreds of relevant pages that are not actually organized in a way that makes it particularly easy to find stuff of a particular type. And so you can come in here, and we've organized a lot of Wikipedia pages around the topic of climate change mitigation. And you can do that for all of the different Wikipedia topics: climate futures, climate science. Again, nothing magical here, but we can save you a lot of time finding the information. Another relevant thing that we're doing, this is pretty new, so there's not a huge amount here yet, but there is quite a bit. When we see interesting conversations on any of these topics on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn can be a really useful place to see how people are talking about climate change issues, we will pull those links into the hot topics section so you can easily access a lot of that thinking. And so here, just for example, some of the very recent stuff on hydrogen and the future of hydrogen. And there will be much more in this shortly because we're still just adding a lot of content. But in LinkedIn in particular is an amazing resource, but it is extremely difficult to find stuff that you might have seen 2 weeks ago. It's basically impossible. And so if we pull those links out, organize those links here, then you can take advantage of any of that stuff at any time. Um, One of the last things I wanted to show you is just uh, in terms of business decision support, for example, I've mentioned insights pages before, hundreds of insights pages. This is just one of them. But this is a page about pre-mortems, which is a business decision support tool that we ought to be using a lot more. Is different from a postmortem. A pre-mortem is saying, my company went bankrupt in 5 years. Why? And psychologically, there's a whole line of psychological argument around why, and that's explained right here. Richard, father of behavioral economics, is a strong proponent of doing pre-mortems. And so there's a whole line of psychological argument that thinking about something this way, as opposed to just thinking about it in terms of one of 25 scenarios, can be much better and much more impactful to our psychology of the issue. And obviously, I'm not trying to make you experts on pre-mortems here. I'm simply pointing that is one of the 5, 6, 700 insights pages that you can leverage and take advantage of in the premium access climate web. So towards the end of this, the details of premium access, this is something that you can easily take a look at. And in the premium access, if you're interested, you can just come down and 90,000 books and reports, news and opinion pieces, 35,000 extracted ideas and graphics, 3,500 index entries, 500 advanced topical dashboards, 2,000 topical search terms. What we've organized in this thing is pretty amazing, and I would think that there's something in here for everyone. And in terms of getting access to this, and basically the 2,000 hours that we add to it every year, for 2 cups of Starbucks coffee a month, I think is a pretty amazing idea. That said, for people that can't afford anything, if you would really use the climate web to help advance climate change objectives, and you really can't afford it, please contact us, because our goal is to help mitigate climate change. And so we will make it possible for that cannot afford even what we're laying out here. I should mention under this beyond premium access that there are other options, so that for example, at the other end of the spectrum, you can purchase slices of the climate web to create your own fully customizable knowledge management system. And you can do that for almost any topic. And for a large consulting firm or a large company, a law firm, you can purchase a copy of the entire climate web, and then we'll help you make it fit for purpose and help you reorganize it, which is very easy to do in this software. And we'll train super users in your organization. And so you can have your own climate change research department up and running in about a day. And you can do that for $25,000, which for something that we've spent millions of dollars building isn't a bad deal at all. It's pennies on the dollar. But we would love to see this become a key resource for organizations And if somebody points us towards a company that buys that version of the full climate web, we're happy to pay a 10% commission on that purchase price. Let me show you one last thing here before I stop and take any other questions that you might have. Um, and Eric, this is a risk management tool, whether you're talking about individuals, whether you're talking about companies. I come at this from a risk perspective. I was director of climate risk at a 10,000 person firm. That is my focus, is trying to communicate climate risk. And one of the things that you'll find in here is a big focus on how we are underestimating risk and why we're underestimating risk and what we ought to be doing about it. Let me just point out that this thought, no premium access, which you'll see instantly if you come into the premium access climate web. And again, it's very easy. Premium.theclimateweb.org will bring you right here. If you click on the no premium access button and then scroll down, what we've done is identify a lot of stuff where these links will work if you click on them. We've made these links specifically public, even though a lot of the other links might not be. These links are intentionally public, so you can come in here and get your own sense on a lot of other topics of just how big, how flexible the premium access climate web is, and why we say that it really is, the equivalent of 150,000 climate Lego blocks that we can combine in whatever ways make sense. So we have put together advanced briefings for companies on complicated climate topics simply by organizing some of these Lego blocks, and then we can present them as a webinar or as an ebook or as whatever. So I'm going to stop sharing there. You haven't seen much of me because I wanted to maximize the space that you had for actually seeing the climate web. I hope that worked out well. I'm happy to take any other questions that you might have. I hope you'll consider taking a look at Premium Access. I would really appreciate any mention that you might make of the climate web, because our big problem is that nobody knows about it. And now that the software makes it possible for anyone to really use it on their iPhone, we really do want people to know about it. And any help that you and others can provide in that regard would be greatly appreciated. So I do know that we're coming up towards the end of the hour, but is there anything else that I can show you or help you see how it's explored in the climate web, or questions that I might answer before we wrap things up? And I assume everyone did see the launched offer there, because all you have to do is click on that to go right to our webpage, the $10 a month deal for access to premium access. Anything else? I know that it's the end of the day, both here on the West Coast, and it's already past the end of the day on the East Coast. So I'm perfectly happy to wrap things up. If we are done here. So just taking a last look at the comments or the chat. I'm not seeing anything specific. I do really appreciate your folks sticking around. Any feedback on the climate web, any feedback on this webinar, whether by email or whatever, mark@climatographer.com would be totally appreciated. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thanks, Eric. Thanks others for participating. And we will see you in another webinar.